Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the complaint videos on TikTok and so on that younger people under the age of 30, particularly young women, say in their early to mid 20s, the complaints they have about being able to afford primarily independent living on a day-to-day sort of basis. Can they afford rent and food and run a car, all that sort of stuff. Now, there's a video that I think it was featured by Matt Walsh just recently, and other ones that Tim Pool and so on have done. And it's typically young women, young men too, but mostly young women, where they're saying, hey, I can't afford to pay the fucking rent, put food on the table, run a car and do this and do that. And so they're having to make serious trade-offs. I've either got to move, have a roommate or share an apartment or a place with multiple other people, or I can't afford a motor vehicle, or I can't afford a social life, or I have to work two jobs, or I have to, so they're having to compromise somewhere. Now, here's this is a woman here, about 25, I figure. She's saying, look, I work a full-time job, and given the expenses that she listed, and there are some things like, she's got a car. Is it a new car she's making payments on? Is it an older car that she owns outright, but maybe it's expensive to keep on the road, repairs and maintenance, that sort of stuff. What's going on here, and what's the actual breakdown of a cost? For example, she appears to have quite an expensive haircut with hair dye. How much does she cost? How much does she pay on looking the part? Maybe she's in marketing or something like that, and she needs to look the business. Have the uniform, if you will, for the. So there's a few questions that I'd ask if she was sort of sitting in front of me, but just on the face value of what she said, given the cost structure she claims to be operating under, she needs to make, give or take the average wage. And she'd just scrape by on that. She wouldn't live well, but she could live independently now. She doesn't say is she in a one-bedroom apartment, a two-bedroom apartment. She's saying she doesn't have a luxurious lifestyle. Others have said this too. Look, I'm not living in luxury, so I should be able to easily afford this. That's not necessarily the point here. What is your income earning capacity? What can you reasonably do? What are your trade-offs? And I think everybody has to make those. I mean, I make them, and my wife and I make them. I made them as a young guy. You have to make trade-offs and say, well, I'm going to have to get in some people to share the apartment, roommates, share accommodation partners, that sort of thing, and that would suddenly, her rent in her case, or in anyone's case, her rent would go from $22,000 a year down to $11,000 a year. So suddenly she's got $11,000 extra in her pocket that she didn't have previously. Does she want to share? Is it, would she prefer to live independently? Well, hey, yeah, well, why not? Maybe it's a one-bedroom apartment. I don't know. There are other factors here, but if she got in someone to share the apartment, then she could easily afford it. Now, when I was a young guy, I had to do that. That was the mathematics of what I earned and this and that, or how much I wanted to save. These sorts of things, I had to do it. I'll go back now to just as globalization was kicking off in serious earnest. I went to, and I've mentioned this previously, I went to a talk by an editor of one of the major international propaganda media companies. And it was a company that even then had been seconded, if you like, into the globalist propaganda machine, and their job was to convince people that globalization was here, it was to stay, this is how it is. If you don't like it, too fucking bad, and if you're one of the plebs, then you're going to have to suck it up, and your standard of living is going to go down. That's how it is. That's what the game is. And if you don't like it, you can fuck off. And this was very much his attitude. I mean, the smarmy fuck he was too. I mean, here's a guy on a multi-million-dollar salary just to spread lies and propaganda who's married into money. His suit costs more than a lot of people would make in a month. His idea of hardship is that his wife can only go on shopping trips to Paris, once a fortnight instead of once every day. And it's insane that someone of that privilege and wealth is telling the rest of us how well, your standard of living is going down, and that's it, motherfuckers. And sneering. I mean, I wouldn't say sneering necessarily, but more condescension than sneering. But when it came to question time, someone said, well, okay, in the interests of globalization, will you give up your job to somebody from the Indian subcontinent that will do your job for a tenth of what you're getting paid? No. I don't give up my privileges. It's for the plebeians. They give up their privileges. You riffraff, you unwashed, you straight white little fuck asses. It's you give up your stuff. No, I'm not giving up mine. Hey, get this right. So I mean, clearly it was the elites in full gallop there, telling the rest of us that our standard of living is going to go into the toilet, and which indeed it has. So let's have a look at that. Now the guy came up with he was telling the truth too. He was like broadcasting it out loud. I didn't quite sort of see that at the time, but he said, look, you Western workers, you white people, if you're not in a privileged, well-connected, already wealthy position, you're going to now, globalization means you will be competing with the illiterate peasants of the third world. So unless you're in a high value add, high knowledge IP job, unless you're in that, you are now competing directly with illiterate peasants in the third world prepared to work for a lot less than you're getting paid. So because of that, the following will occur. He just laid it out. Either, you have to work 30-40% more hours, or your standard of living will drop by 30-40%. And you'll just have to tighten the belt and accept that you will have a lower standard of living from here on in. And I was aghast that somebody could so boldly and so casually and with such condescension announce that. So, again, so publicly. Where were the politicians, fighting on our behalf, our own politicians that we elect? Where were, but they're all controlled by the globalists anyway. So really, that's exactly how it's come to pass. In fact, I'd say he was slightly conservative. The purchasing power of the paycheck has probably declined even more than he thought it would, or he indicated it would. And he was just a mouthpiece for the boys downtown. I mean, he's no genius. So anyway, this was, and this is what these. It was possible for someone on an average wage to have, to rent a 2-bedroom apartment, to run a motor vehicle, to, have a vacation. And it was possible 20 years ago. And certainly, 30, 40, 50 years ago, it was eminently possible. But it's not anymore. So someone on the average wage can have in just an ordinary area. You can't be in a nice area for this. Can have a 1-bed apartment or a compact 2-bed apartment. Maybe just you've got enough money to run a motor vehicle, but only just. And you can't afford a social life. If you get sick or lose your job, you're out of work for a few weeks, you hit the wall straight away. So it's a precarious day-to-day existence. Benefits that workers used to have in terms of sick leave and medical benefits, all these sorts of things, hospital care plans and so on, all gone, or much of it anyway gone, and they're in deep shit now. So the average wage is a precarious existence, and a very tight existence. So really, you're being forced into communal living. This is the future now. The idea of independent living for anyone other than an upper income earner is financially getting to the point of impossibility for anyone, say, even in Australia, you look at the average wage of, say, 120% of the average wage, so 20% on top of the average wage. Even that would be a stretch. You'd be in the outer suburbs. You'd be living again in a very compact 2-bedroom or 1-bedroom place. I mean, it would be not impossible, but it would be pretty tight. I mean, your social life would be minimal. You couldn't afford to go out and a nightclub or go to the bars to pick up chicks or something. That would be beyond you, and you'd have to live. You'd have to buy the cheapest cuts of meat and buy the items on promotion and special at the grocery store. You'd have to be careful and watchful of what you spent your money on. You wouldn't want to get sick, and so on. So you'd have a rather tight existence. So the only way you can really get around that is to live communally. And a lot of people try to live near, say, a major transport hub, buses or trains. So they don't need to own a car, but then the prices of those areas are more expensive. And if you do the trade-off between owning a car and paying the extra rent you have to be near a significant transport hub, then also you're looking at there's not a whole lot of difference actually. And I've done the mathematics on that, assuming you buy an ordinary car, not something. Look at the payments you would make on that car per month, say spread over 5 years. Then you look at the difference in rent at being conveniently close to one of those transport hubs. Also, you don't necessarily get a better place. And there's I've looked just earlier on today at the rents in my area, and the difference between an entry level rental and one where you've got a reasonably nice place, there isn't actually that much. There's maybe this is a lot of money if you're on a fixed income and an average wage, but the difference in rent may only be $200 or so a week, but you've got a compact 2-bedroom place that's not got not up to date or anything. It's on a major highway on one side. It's got a train line on another. The garage is so small that you barely fit a fucking bicycle into it, and I mean it's just tiny. And again, not upgraded to the latest standards in the kitchen and the bathroom and that sort of stuff. You got noisy neighbours. You're packed in tight and all that type of thing. Whereas you get a place that's freestanding, it's 3 bedrooms, it's spacious. That's only $200 or so a week more, which isn't much in the overall scheme of the universe. But again, if you're on a fixed average wage, then $200 a week is a lot of money. So these are the choices. Now the Gen Z people complaining that they can't, and it's a genuine complaint, by the way. I've got a lot of sympathy for it. The standard of living they're required, the choices they're required to make, none of them are pleasant. They all involve going without. So they have to work. So they've got to work a full-time job and a part-time job. So working on weekends or nights, which shoots their social life out, and so they've got to do that. Or they have to take in roommates and people to share the apartment, thereby to amortize the cost over more people, or they have to just tighten the belt and just really knuckle down and go without. Why should they have to do any of those things? Well, no, they shouldn't. Did people have to make those difficult choices 25 years ago? Well, no, they didn't. Those young people, I say someone young coming out of college, or you're at college and you're living a sort of a very frugal Spartan type existence, but that's only temporary, and you can see bright sunshine at the end of the tunnel. The difference that the Gen Z have now is they're looking at having to make all these difficult choices, live frugally and go without and make the hard choices, but there's no bright sunlight at the end of the tunnel. And this is really those two thoughts together are what are understandably putting them in a rather gloomy frame of mind, and anybody would be. Now, how can they get out of that? Well, the choices are all unpleasant ones. Now, they may not want to live communally, as in have roommates. they may not want to go without their car, or they may not want to go without their. And I know people are having to make these decisions. Someone we know had a car and it was starting to cost a fortune in maintenance and upkeep. And she doesn't know the first thing about cars, by the way. And I think the mechanic was ripping her off royally, but that's my view. And so she said, look, I can't afford to have a car. I've just got to use public transport. I can't afford this $5,000 a year on fucking car repairs. I've just got to, and also the amount of people are doing round robins on credit cards. And again, you have to be prepared to make hard decisions to. And I'm going to do another video on that. This the making of the process of making hard decisions and how you arrive at them, and it's practically based. If you've got to go without, you go without. Now, at any time in my life when I've gone without something or had to make that trade-off, I've always perceived, well, it's only temporary. Things will get better, tomorrow or the next day, and I can always see that light at the end of the tunnel. Either once I've paid off this debt, that'll be fine, or once this, or once that. But these people in Gen Z are saying there's no light in the tunnel. All I can see is further deterioration in my standard of living, which is probably true, that they are accurate in that. The globalists are forcing this mass transfer of wealth away from, the ordinary sort of working middle class white citizen, moving it away to the likes of the BlackRocks and the big property developers and the big banks and corporations and so on, and away from the citizen. Now, so they're quite correct on this, but it doesn't alter the fact that it's happening. It's real and it's here and it's happening in real time. So they have to make those tough decisions about living communally. Now, we're being effectively forced to do that. If you look at the amount of white papers and discussion papers that are going around to think tanks at the moment, the issue is, okay, we're committed to bringing in gazillions of third world peasants into the first world. That is going to happen. Nothing will stop it. We're absolutely committed to it. We'll fight to the death. All these straight white people at the apex, by the way, will fight to the death to make sure all these brown and black peasants keep on coming into the West. What this means is we can't build houses quick enough. What this means is we're going to force people to if they've got, you'll be allocated a certain amount of bedrooms or square footage or whatever per person, and you can see it happening in the same way as it was in the Soviet Union. In effect, the communist ideological fanatical societies, you're going to be allocated a certain amount of space per person, and if you don't conform to that, they'll just tax the living shit out of you or something. They're going to find a way of coercing and threatening you. Political commissars will come after you, and really it's down to that. So that's how they're going to free it. So really we're moving to the situation where you're going to be forced to live communally. Nobody will be allowed to live independently, and if you do, you'll just have to pay an extra tax on your income or on your property or on your rent or whatever. But there'll be, now people on higher incomes will say, well, look, I'll pay that extra 15% tax because I want to live independently, and I've got a trust fund income or something. So they can do that. But for the average person making somewhere on or about the average wage, which is why it's called the average wage, so the average person can't afford that. So they will have to live communally, and really, it's got. I think every lounge room is going to be a bedroom. You're going to have 2 bedrooms. Maybe couples are in the bedroom instead of one person. So it could be 2 incomes per person, or per bedroom could be 2 incomes. Then you got a lounge room where you convert the lounge chair into a bed and you put people out. And I noticed in even upper middle income countries that's quite a standard way of doing things. That's not considered unusual. It's only in the rich West where living independently and having your own bedroom is a thing. You don't really see that much in, some friends of mine in Rome. The guy's got a full-time job, wife's got a full-time job, but they can only afford a 1-bedroom apartment in the outer suburbs. That's all they can afford, and they're both on the average wage, slightly above it, but they can't really manage any more than that. So they invited me to. I didn't realise I only had a 1-bedroom apartment. I was there for a few days, and they said, "Hey, come and stay with us." So I just assumed I had a spare bedroom. I didn't even think about it or ask. And so I arrive. I ask, well, where do you want me to sleep? So there, and he points to the lounge that folds out into a bed, and that's where you stay there. And by that stage, I'd already agreed to, and I didn't want to say. I mean, I could have. I had some company business to do there, not much, but I could have gone to a hotel and claimed it on the company, but I felt like obligated because I knew people that knew them, and I didn't want them to think that I was being, difficult to get on with or something. So I stayed there. But that was quite. Oh, that's how it is. And they introduced me to other friends of theirs who, again, husband and wife, both working, both on the average wage, and they again both had. They were all living in these one-bedroom apartments, and because that's all they could afford. I thought, holy fuck! Well, who are these people who can afford the other apartments, the bigger apartments? Yeah, who are they? Given that you're both working and both on the average wage, I mean, holy shit! And that's sort of moving into the rich west now. So everybody I knew had their own place when I was, say, a younger man. Everyone had their own place. Now you just see that less and less, and those who do have their own place are really struggling to get by. So I see this as the natural architecture, if you will, of the economy that's being now. Make no mistake, this economy that we're living in, having to make these, it's been forced on us. Nothing organic or natural about it at all. You've been a Tassos today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.